Hαίrete, friends. Welcome to Classics in Color, your weekly dive into some of the ancient world's wackiest facts. I'm Mark Graves, and today we're going to be talking about killing babies, so buckle up. My main source for this video is The Tophet and Infant Sacrifice by Matthew McCarty. This is a chapter from the excellent book, The Oxford Handbook of the Phoenician and Punic Mediterranean. So by all means, check that out if you are interested in learning more. Different men use different laws. With us, for instance, human sacrifice is not legal but unholy, whereas the Carthaginians perform it as a thing they account holy and legal. And that too, when some of them sacrifice even their own sons to Kronos, as I dare say you yourself have heard. So that is a quote from one of Plato's dialogues, and it expresses what seems to have been a fairly widespread opinion that the Carthaginians regularly sacrificed children to their gods. Sounds pretty salacious, right? And for a while, a lot of scholars were pretty skeptical of this claim. They thought that the Greeks and Romans were probably just exaggerating or misinterpreting something that was going on there. But what we're going to do in this video is look at some more recent archaeological evidence that seems to fairly strongly indicate that they weren't exaggerating. There was some child sacrifice happening. So we have over 100 archaeological sites scattered all over the Mediterranean. So they come from different places and different time periods, but they all look kind of like little graveyards. They are just full of these urns filled with bones. And sometimes these are animal bones, especially of young and baby animals, so lambs, goat kids, that sort of thing. But a good percentage of the time, those bones are from babies or small children. Now, that in and of itself isn't enough to prove that the Carthaginians were practicing human sacrifice, because child mortality rate in the ancient world was crazy high. So it's possible that these children died of natural causes and then were buried. And despite the variation over time and space, they do have a lot of similarities. So there's usually a lot of carved stone, whether in dedications or altars or pillars, that kind of thing. And they're all associated with Baal, the Phoenician god. To give you some vocabulary, we have the Phoenician words mok, which means burned sacrifice. We have the letters QDS, which is Phoenician for shrine. And then we have the word Tophet, which actually comes from the Bible. So if you look in Jeremiah, there is an account of worshipers who burned sons and daughters in a fire, which again sounds pretty bad, but it's possible that the biblical account might have the same biases that scholars thought the Romans and the Greeks had against the Phoenicians. Let's get into the reasons why this was probably sacrifice and not natural death. First off, we have the fact that you could swap out human bones with animal bones. If this is an infant graveyard, then why were people going to all the trouble to bury a lamb? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Next up, if you look at the percentage of which bones were of which gender, about 37 were male and 54 were female. And if you look at infanticide across cultures, they do tend to skew against women. They just don't like to keep us around, apparently. So that also looks more like infanticide than like natural death. Next, if you look at infant burials across the ancient world, across the Mediterranean, they are very low budget. They are very, very simple if they happen at all. So unfortunately, like I said, the infant mortality rate in the ancient world was so high, people lost so many babies that they seem to have gotten kind of numb to it. They weren't as sad when a baby died, and they didn't put as much effort into their funerals as they would into someone who had lived a bit longer. In fact, the longer and the more you accomplish in your life, the bigger funeral you're probably going to have. But if you're just a baby who died on delivery, then they're not going to do a whole lot for you. And like I said, if you look at these archaeological sites, they're full of these big carved stones that are elaborate, that have these dedications on them, and that just isn't consistent at all with infant burials anywhere else. Now, you could say that, well, the Carthaginians just care about their babies more than everyone else, and I suppose that's possible, but if you look at the inscriptions that are on those stones, it doesn't quite check out. So the inscriptions on these stones follow the very standard widespread formula of either asking God for help or thanking a god for help. So it's super common in the ancient world before you set out for war, or maybe you're just making a trading journey, that before you leave, you sacrifice to a god and say, hey, please help me with this, keep me safe. And then when you get back, you make another sacrifice to say, hey, thanks for filling out your end of the bargain. And that's what these inscriptions look like. So for example, we have one that says, to Lady Tanit, face of Baal, and to Lord Baal, because he, the god, heard the dedicant's voice and he blessed him. So the idea here is that the god helped this guy, whoever he is, and now this guy is making this offering in thanks. So again, this sounds much more like a ritual sacrifice than a, oh no, our baby died. Finally, let's look at the 3rd century BC Greek historian Cleitarchus, who gives us a description of what this ritual might have looked like. The Carthaginians, honoring Kronos, whenever they seek to be successful in some great thing, accordingly vow one of their children, burning it as a sacrifice to the god. Among them is set a bronze statue of Kronos, its hands stretched out over a bronze brazier, which burns the child. When the scorching flames fall upon the body, the limbs contract and the opened mouth appears almost to laugh until the contracted body slides quietly into the brazier. So we have not uncovered any fancy baby dropping machine at any of these sites, but all of the bones in those urns are burnt and contracted. So that at least, unfortunately, does check out. Why this was such a popular ritual, no one really knows. I think Maccarty brings up maybe population control. That doesn't make a ton of sense to me because the Greeks, their preferred method of population control was to send off the excess elsewhere, right? To ship them off to go on adventures and conquer other people and colonize. And the Phoenicians were even bigger explorers and colonizers than the Greeks were, so I'm not sure why they couldn't have managed their population that way as well. I don't know, we probably never will, but regardless, it was very popular for several hundred years, although it did eventually begin to fade, and by the time Christianity came around, it was gone, vanished forever, thank goodness. Thank you so much for checking out this video. I have a quick announcement before you click away. So I've had several people recommend that I try playing the video game Hades, and I'm a little intimidated, but I'm gonna try it, and I'm also going to try streaming it. So if you have any interest in watching me struggle through this game, please keep an eye out. I'll have some announcements for when that's gonna happen coming up soon as I figure out the logistics of that. If anyone wants to watch, that will be available, so please keep an eye out. And thank you, as always, to subscribers and to Patreon members, and I hope to see all of you again next week. Χαίρετε.